Hey there, Skullheads. I'm Snags.
And I'm old Silky.
And I'm Jay.
And we want you to go to snagsandsilky.com, buy all the merch, and check out all the cool links on there. If you're bored and you have nothing better to do and you're just sitting on your ass wondering why you're alive, go to snagsandsilky.com and check out all the check out all.
You got your tax return back. It's time to buy a hoodie.
Yeah, or if you're just bored, go check out all the movies, all the books, and all the music we got linked there. There's a reason we call it the Click Pit, all right? Get in there and fucking click.
Yeah.
The other thing you want to do is share this podcast with your friends, and you want to make sure that you're following us on Spotify and YouTube. And
share that was with somebody you hate. We don't care.
Yeah.
So
there you go. So now Silky's going to rap at you a little bit.
All right. So tonight is episode 61, if I'm not mistaken. And in the past, a few weeks ago, we did one on Taylor, based on everybody harping at us. So we did one on
Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah. And this is going back, early 80s, Hall & Oates were really big. Huey Lewis was raking up the charts. And, thinking of all that, we wanted to touch on another band right in there, the Butthole Surfers.
Yeah.
And, so
same ethos.
We've got Jay here, who's been, I think it's like his 6th episode with us.
One of our regular.
That many times?
It's been a minute. It's been a few. So I was just real quick. They formed in Texas in 81, I believe. It was Gibby Haynes, Paul Leary, King Coffee, Jeff Pincus. They did have Teresa Nervosa as a second drummer in the 80s. On and off, but one thing I wanted to mention before I turn it over to Jay is Gibby Haynes and Paul Leary. They met in the late 70s, and they had a shared love for alternative music. And in 81, they actually published a magazine called Strange VD, and it was abnormal medical ailments and fictitious explanations for the diseases. And apparently where Gibby Haynes worked, he accidentally left something on the printer, some deformed genitalia photo or something, and was promptly fired from where he was.
He was an accountant. He worked at. Yeah. Can you imagine that guy working at an accounting firm? That's pretty funny.
I love it. However, that magazine you can get in its entirety in a book called What Does Regret Mean? Hardcover book. It was numbered like 1,500 copies, and you can get it on eBay for $400. So
what a bargain! That's a fucking bargain.
We won't be seeing that. But what sucks is if you were aware of it when it came out, it listed for about $45.
Yeah,
which I would have snagged that up immediately. But anyway, so with Lafarge on board, I do need to say, Tower Records early, 90, July of 90 is when I met Jay, and
91. That was July 91. It was 91.
So 91, pre-91, I loved most music that stuck to a verse, chorus, verse, guitars over in 4 to 5 minutes, or like the Allman Brothers or something. But I was not fully exposed, I'd say, to what they call alternative, or more of a jazz freak out type thing that the Surfers were. And It's awesome to do tonight's show with Jason because through him I discovered the Butthole Surfers, Jesus Lizard, the Meat Puppets, the Melvins, John Spencer Blues Explosion, even Frank Zappa, just to pursue music that was not just that verse, chorus, verse, that almost demanded better musicianship, really, because to just fly by the seat of your pants and just 4 or 5 members all going in the same direction, pretty incredible. So but I owe that to this man here.
Thank you, sir. Well, let me just do a quick little background on my own. I would say I totally agree with you in that the Butthole Surfers for me certainly changed the way I listened to music, much in the way you're saying. And so I first heard them would have been in '89 was when I first came in contact when I was at college in Columbus, Georgia, which is about as conservative and not Butthole Surfers friendly a town as you could possibly think of.
It is though kind of the butthole of Georgia. So there's that tie-in.
It does. There's certainly a tie-in there for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I would I first heard Locust Abortion Technician, which was their 1987 album that they recorded. It was the first album they had actually recorded on their own. And they were living just in this shack, I think at the time, basically sort of squatting, if I'm not mistaken. And eventually the DOT removed, I think they were widening the road they were on and they removed that shack, including their tape recorder that they had at the time. I think they had to leave it because it was I'm not even sure what it was. It may have been like a Studer A800 or something. It was big and unwieldy, and they couldn't move it, and it ended up getting, I think, destroyed with whatever.
Damn.
Oldest. Yeah.
But you hear cows on that album, like at the very end of it. There's the repeating cow thing, and those were actually cows in the field next to where they were living at the time.
That's such a great record.
It's a great record. So I also want to just go back quick and talk about their beginnings. When they started off, it was the 3 of them. It was Gibby, Paul, and King. Pincus didn't join them until '86. And
shit.
And they went through a bunch of bass players before that, including and I also have to preface this by saying I wanted to be a little bit more prepared and have like notes in front of me, but life happened today and I never got around to
we're doing the podcast in the style of the Butthole Surfers.
There you go, by the seat of your pants.
That's right.
But
I got a little tidbit.
Go ahead.
They were so I was listening to an interview with King and Paul on YouTube, which I'll link in the click pit. Matador Records has this podcast series, and they interview a lot of people. They re-released a lot of the Butthole Surfer stuff, and they were influenced by the Meat Puppets. Was one of their first early influences. Meat Puppets came through town, opening for Black Flag, and they said it was just chaos. You listen to early first Meat Puppets album, it's very similar to early Butthole Surfers, and that's because they were directly influenced by them. They said their amps were falling over and they were just insanity.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, oh, we can do this. And that inspired them to start a band. But go ahead, keep on rapping.
Sure. No, sure. Yeah. So one of the bassists they had early on was Kramer, who was founder of. He was in the band Bongzilla. He was Shimmy Discs founder. He put out some Ween stuff. He's put out countless things. Eugene Chadbourne. A bunch of in recent years, a bunch of the solo Butthole Surfer stuff, including the J.D. Pincus albums, solo banjo. highly recommended. And the Paul Leary, the reissue of his first solo album, History of Dogs, and then there's a second solo album that was also put out. But anyway, Kramer was briefly their bass player in actually I want to say it was mid 1985, but earlier basically they went through 3 or 4 bass players in the year 1985, and they started off that year with this guy named Trevor Malcolm, and the best eBay find I have ever found, and will never top this, is this copy of Psychic Powerless, Another Man's Sack, which is their 1985 album that was signed in, and it's not dated at all, but I know because it came from a guy in Chicago. It was signed and had artwork by Gibby Haynes, Paul Leary, and then there's a poem by Teresa, who has since left.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
right there. Yeah.
Poem for Teresa.
So we're looking at this wild artwork they scrawled on the album cover. Pretty cool.
And then in the corner in ballpoint pen over here is a letter from or a note from Trevor Malcolm, who was the bass player for just a very brief period and only played Chicago once, which would have been March 1st, 1985. And
so that's probably that night or something.
Well, yeah, because he was only in the band for about 2 months, and this came from Chicago. So and I found it for like less than $50. It was easily the greatest eBay find I've ever.
That's tremendous.
That's badass.
So anyway, so continuing on, Jeff actually went to Jeff Pincus went to high school with my former bandmate Mitch Foy in Pineal Ventana, and in fact they went to Butthole at least one Butthole Surfer show together at the Metroplex, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow!
And then
the Metroplex, for you cats aren't in the know, was basically it was our CBGB's Maxis Kansas City in Atlanta. We had the Metroplex and the 688 Club, and those were our CBGBs. Yeah. CBGB's in Maxis Kansas City. So that's what he's referring to there.
Exactly. So Pincus was then, I'm not sure, I should know this, but Pincus then left high school and joined the Butthole Surfers. I don't think he finished high school. I think he left, he quit high school to join this crazy band of Texans on the
maniacs.
Road, and they were maniacs, and that's the next thing that we should touch on is their psychedelic use and their just utter wackiness on stage, and
lighting the drum cymbals on fire, firing a shotgun above the crowd, just crazy shit that would get you put in jail probably today.
That shotgun, that was on the
got to be blanks, I'm assuming, but still.
Blanks. Oh,
it was the Independent Worm Saloon tour.
Yep.
And we were outside of Lakewood. So it was the next door to it or something.
Right. The first time I'd seen him break it out would have been before that. It would have been in at the first Lollapalooza. He did it at the very first Lollapalooza, because and that was a weird experience, seeing the Butthole Surfers during the day, because they were the second band on. It was Rollins' band and then the Butthole Surfers, and for a band that was so visual and had basically also during their entire career, they never, like, Gibby was in control of the money, and he would like dole out the money for just, it was a very communal living type situation, and all of the money that they would make virtually went into the light show and went into their stage show. So they were, walking around poor all the time because they never had any cash on them. Gibby controlled the cash, and they were, just.
I think they said on that podcast, they said that they would get $3 a day food money. And back then in the 80s, you could get a slice of pizza for $1 and you could get a beer for $1. So the decision that day was always, is it going to be 2 beers in one slice, or one slice and or 2 slices and 1 beer? That was the big food decision every day.
That's insane.
It's a tough decision to make.
That is rough.
So yeah, they lived in crazy conditions, and there is some dispute as to how much acid was around. Paul Leary claims not as much as people say.
As they would believe.
Sure, but there are lots of crazy stories regarding those guys.
I tell you, like for me, discovering them and going over, you were living with Joe and Kurt, and I did, I didn't feel like we were suddenly celebrities, but I felt like we weren't necessarily working. You got paid and you were in and around the music thing, and you could basically hang out at a record store all day. And the exposure to all the music was like everything. I was in cloud nine, but there were certain bands, specifically the Butthole Surfers, where you would watch. I believe you had a VHS of Blind Ice-T's Hall. Did you?
Sure.
Yeah. And watching that, and I'm like, good God, these guys must be shot the fuck out on.
Yeah, I think on that video, I think they were pretty tripping. They're tripping balls, especially in the interview. Sure.
Well, like
but there was no acid around.
Right, but they were able to make this amazing music. So it kind of underlines Bill Hicks said, not everybody that does drugs, is an asshole. Something
sure. Oh, well, for sure. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, and certainly, I'm sure drugs influenced the makings of those records, but at the same time, they were decent musicians. And certainly, Paul had been playing for years. It's like they knew what they were doing. But they started off as just the three of them, and then a rotating cast of bass players, and then Teresa joined them in, I believe it was 83. She was running I think it was a rehearsal studio, or she had a big enough space that had room for them to rehearse, and they were renting the space from her, and then she just sort of joined the band that way. And what's funny though is that she and King look so similar that they were thought to be twins, but they you had the dual drummers that were playing both standing up. It was a sight to behold, really. You see those early
that's pretty cool
sessions. So it went around with that group for a while. Then they also had a new dancer that would join them on stage for several years. Her name is Kathleen Lynch, and it's actually a good friend of mine. At the time, she was known as Tada the Shit Lady. And she got that moniker because I believe it was a Times Square porn shop. She was going in to look for employment, and they asked if she had any special skill. And she basically bent over and had a huge spray of diarrhea, and either towards them or on the wall. And she stood up and went, "Ta-da!" And so she became known as Tada the Shit Lady, and that was her origin story of how she got that name. But she became it was magical, and so she became their new dancer, and she is actually on the front of a doctored image of hers on the front of the Double Live LP that came out. I think Gibby did some sort of computer or some sort of
is that
thing it looks like an alien bent over, but that's actually Kathleen. And
no shit.
And the artwork inside that album, there's plenty of pictures of her as well.
Yeah.
But she was around in the 80s, and then probably left, I would say 88, 89, and she started a band called the Beme Seed, Beme Seed, and put out 3 albums, I think, with Beme Seed. And it's pretty interesting stuff. She had a cool voice, and Pineal Vitana ended up playing with her a lot back in the day.
That Double Live, I think that came out in 90. That thing is just the almost the holy grail. And I believe it was, you could get the MP3 of it on their website for a long time.
It's
Oh,
not
yeah,
on
probably so.
Spotify, unfortunately. Spotify didn't
No.
have it.
But that was mostly recorded at the Metroplex, if not fully recorded at the Metroplex. I think, if I'm not mistaken, part of it might not have been, but they did like a 2 or 3 nights in November of '88, I think it was.
That's why. Is that why they do the REM cover?
Sure. I mean, well, and well, there was a rumor for years, and it's since been debunked, but that when Butthole Surfers left for a while, they were actually living outside of Athens, and the rumor was that when they left, they parked their van that was dying. They left on Michael Stipe's front yard with some graffiti on it, but that unfortunately has since been debunked. I always liked that story, but
Yes,
apparently it didn't happen.
That sucks. That's a shame.
But anyway, but yes, for a little while they actually lived in Georgia for a brief period. I think it was around the time that they did Hairway to Stebbin, I think, around that time. Which would have been 88, 89.
88, yeah.
Yeah, right around then.
Wow.
So then Teresa had to leave the band. She was experiencing health issues that she had some seizures, and she went to go see a neurologist, and the neurologist asked if she'd ever been exposed to flashing lights, and she just laughed at him, because that's, I mean, the part of
Every
the
night
thing is just every night. It was just, it was a not, so she basically left the band and didn't return again until the reunion in 2008, which I was lucky enough to see, where they were playing a lot of shows with the Paul Green School of Music or School of Rock or whatever. It's basically, there were a bunch of teenagers playing on stage with them, and it was surreal. It was utterly surreal. But Teresa was back for that, and sadly she just died at the end of last year. I want to say it was she had been battling not lung cancer, but like a chronic lung disease,
CBD or something
like that. Yeah. And she was in hospice for a number of months before she went. But
shit.
Yeah.
Oh, sucks.
That's awful.
Yeah. So that she's no longer with them, but the band existed with just 4 of them, with King Coffee switching from a standing up behind the kit playing like he did with Teresa. They switched to a more of a traditional trap kit where he was sitting down and playing, and it was just a single drummer. And it was that lineup for a while, at least through the Independent Worm Saloon album. And then Jeff Pincus left. I think at that time, Gibby was hitting heroin pretty hard. He had gone that route, and it's no fun being in a band with a junkie. So
not like that.
Yeah. So I think that was his way out. And so then they continued he was with them. The Independent Worm Saloon was their, sort of jumping around a little bit here, but that was their first major label album. They were actually signed. So we should talk about their labels.
Produced by John Paul Jones.
Produced by John Paul Jones. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a damn good album. But we should talk about their label affiliation real quick. So
Booger Vale.
In the early the first albums were put out by Jello Biafra on Alternative Tentacles.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, first album, and then the live album, which is essentially the exact same songs that are on the first album, but in a live setting. And then after that, they signed to Touch and Go, which is Corey Rusk's label in Chicago, and that ended up being it was their label for many years, for I think a good 5 or 6 years, 6 or 7 years.
I think
maybe.
while we
So many
while
good
we were
indie
working
labels back then.
while we were working at Tower, a lot of those surfer albums had been out of print, and then they were being picked up and in like the cardboard wraparound.
Right. Well, they've been
Mhm.
reissued numerous times, but I think they were reissued again by Touch and Go then. But essentially, Touch and Go, they were affiliated with them for a number of years, and then they always claimed that it was just a sort of a handshake deal, and so they left them to many people's dismay, because Corey Rusk is sort of a beloved character.
Didn't Touch and Go have Jesus Lizard? I mean,
They did, yeah.
that's the perfect label for them, as you know.
Oh, sure, absolutely, and it worked for a number of years. But Butthole Surfers felt that they weren't making as enough money as they could, and they were always Paul and Gibby were always very money-minded, despite the crazy earlier stories.
Hey, we got our special commercial
Condor.
guest here, our spokesman, El Condor, in the house.
Say what's up, everybody.
No.
Well, do your thing.
Go to the website
And
get the mugs.
buy the damn mugs, people.
All
El
right.
Condor has spoken.
All right.
Peace out,
Thanks,
brother.
buddy.
Get back to drinking my Sprite.
That's what
This
he says.
episode brought to you by El Condor Productions.
All right,
All
El
right.
Condor.
All right, lay it on us, Jay.
So then they went off for one album called PO'd, which is kind of a strange album. Actually, there was also an EP called Widower Maker. I think both of these were released by Rough Trade, which promptly went out of business. Like they went bankrupt right after PO'd came out, and so there was Butthole Surfers were very disappointed because there was virtually no. Yeah, what they thought was going to be a better deal than the Touch and Go thing just went straight into the shitter. And then they got signed by Capitol. I'm not sure how that exactly worked out. It's
You know how that happened? The same reason why the Melvins got signed by Atlantic. It was called the alternative explosion. And Nirvana sells a kajillion records, and suddenly these label cats are like, I guess we don't know what works, and they just go out and sign everybody that's kind of underground, thinking they're going to be the next Nirvana. Same thing with Sonic Youth.
Say us working at Tower, we saw so many bands like get suddenly the hottest thing going,
and
and a lot of that also was directly due to Kurt Cobain. I think Kurt Cobain got. Maybe it had something to do with the Butthole Surfers getting a deal. He promoted a lot of different bands.
He definitely got Sonic Youth on Geffen, and Geffen thought that they were going to be the next Nirvana, and nobody was going to be the next Nirvana.
Right, that's true. Yeah, that's
true. That's how that worked out.
That's exactly how that worked out.
And Kurt Cobain's last words were "Hole's gonna be big."
Yeah.
But actually, funny story. I believe that
I think it was, "Why are you holding me down and pointing a shotgun at my head?" I think that was his. Yeah, right. Did Courtney hire you to do this? Something along those lines were his last words. But anyways, go ahead, Jay.
Gibby and Kurt, I believe, were roommates in that last rehab that Kurt Cobain was in. They were there at the same time. Which I don't know. Gibby and the shotgun, Kurt and the shotgun. I don't know. Did he the suggestion thing?
I'll tell you that shotgun. When we saw them, with Dave Roper and everybody.
Well, I want to hear what he was saying about the rehab. His connection got screwy there.
I was just saying that
they didn't say anything.
That they were roommates and that there was a shotgun involved in both cases. You can make your own inferences.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
But we're there live, and he comes out and blasts this shotgun. I don't think I had any warning, so it freaked a lot of people out. It was very electrifying. And
I think that was probably the intent.
Yeah, that was the idea.
A lot of us felt the the flash heat of that fucking thing.
Yeah, because it's still ejected. It was still a rapid. In fact, at the Lollapalooza that I saw the first time I saw him do it, he would actually, because beach balls were being thrown around because it was an outdoor festival, and he actually grabbed one and threw it up and shot it, and it blew apart, and that freaked everybody out, even more because it looked like there's actually a projectile in there, but it's just the force of the air that comes out of those.
It was very powerful to see, and we were like, "Holy shit!" Even after the show was over, that's all you were talking about. Like, dude, when he came out.
And in that interview with King and Paul, I think it was King's talking about how just crazy lax everything was back then. Like, they'd go to these clubs, the fire marshal would always show up because they had a reputation, and he'd say, "Okay, show me what you're going to do. Oh, you're going to light your cymbals on fire? Okay. Oh, you're going to pull out the shotgun and just randomly start firing blanks over? Okay, just making sure." And then they'd leave.
Yeah,
it was just completely lax. Like,
I
think with the Great White,
I was going to say Great White screwed all that up.
That's the end of that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Those were. I mean,
we hair metal bands.
Nathan Gale killing Dimebag.
Much.
Yeah, that took the shotgun the aspect out. Yeah, it's terrible.
Kibosh on the club.
No fire, no shotguns. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, probably a good thing. I remember we had several close calls in Pineal Ventana back in the days.
Hip us to see. I remember hearing. I think I heard a CD or something Brett had, but I don't think I ever saw you cats live. What did you guys do?
Tell him the toilet paper on fire story.
I just want to hear what they did regularly on stage, and then he can hip us to the.
Regularly on stage, we were just, we could be theatrical. It changed. I mean, that was the thing about that band. It always changed. Musically, we had a stand-up drummer also with a hybrid kit that was part drums and part, there was a gas tank from a Cadillac, I think, at one point. There was,
we had lunchbox style and get the old
a little
drums
bit,
up and start beating
but a little more rhythmical and mixed with the drums more, so it may be a little more cop shoot cop type thing. But
Mitch played bass, right?
No, Mitch drums. He was the drummer.
Oh, he was drums.
He was a drummer, but he also sang, and he was also he was the heart of the band in a lot of ways. It was a lot of the artistic ideas and a lot of the just crazy shit that we did with fire on stage, and that was.
So what kind of crazy shit did you do with fire? That's what I'm trying to get.
All right. So
that was the toilet paper story.
Well,
let Jay talk, dude.
I don't actually remember toilet paper going on fire. I remember paper catching on fire from another thing we're using. But what I would talk about would be our final tour, which is in 2000. Yeah, that's right. It's 2000, and basically he had a part of the song where Mitch would go out in the audience, and he had these 80-gallon, 40-gallon drums. I don't know the size the damn things were, but they were, basically oil gallon drums.
Yeah, 50-gallon drums. Yeah,
sure. And so he had denatured alcohol, and he'd worked it out beforehand, and he would pour some on top of the thing, and he would on top of the drum, and then start beating on the top of the drum. And first he'd set it on fire, and it would sort of be a dancing blue. He'd put denatured alcohol, and it'd be a dancing blue, and then he'd start hitting it, and it would sort of fly up a little bit, but it seemed to work when we were practicing it. But when we got it, but then the first place we played was this place, or second place in the tour was in Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia. And this place had all these tapestries and all these things hanging down because our friend, later to be friend, Camille from Kondoholo was playing, and he had all these slide projections. And so in this case, he starts playing. Well, first, I should say this. He has the denatured alcohol in a 409 bottle. So he's spraying it on the top, and he starts beating on it, and it's sort of a dancing blue flame, but it's, he wants it more extreme. So he takes the top of the bottle off.
Oh, nice.
And tries to splash a little bit on there. And he does. and the flame jumps up a little bit, but he doesn't realize that the top of the 409 bottle is now on fire, and he throws it down on the floor behind him. And so there's still denatured alcohol inside the bottle, but now it's the open top of it and it's on fire. And he starts beating the drum. He starts beating the oil drum, and he steps back, as you do, and you're beating and you're rocking back and forth. And he steps on the bottle, shooting the denatured alcohol out of the fire opening and up the wall and on our friend.
Awesome.
And so luckily everybody got it off.
So you set your friend on fire.
Set him on fire, but he was okay. Everybody was okay. We made it through that night. Okay. So I'm just trying to make this relatively quick. So the second night, he doesn't have the 409 bottle anymore. He just has the gadunk little metal denatured alcohol. And so we're in West Virginia, in Morgantown, West Virginia, which I actually have. Well, I can at least tie this into the Butthole Surfers. At the place that we played in Morgantown, West Virginia, it was an old club that's been there forever. And I have a videotape of Kramer playing bass with the Butthole Surfers in 1985 from that place when it was known as the Underground Railroad. Anyway, so now we're playing there, and Mitch no longer has his 409 bottle, but he's got the gadunk denatured alcohol. And so again, this is a bigger place and it's a cement floor. We feel just better about the whole situation. But he pours some on there, starts beating it. Flames are jumping. Everybody jumps out of the way. It's cool. It's kind of a neat visual effect. So Mitch goes to get the denatured bottle to put more on there, but gets it too close to the flame. And now he's got this can with the top of it on fire. And in his hand, all of a sudden it expands, like the fire goes inside the can, and the fire actually in his hand expands, and he thinks it's going to explode in his hand. He's freaking. Sure. He almost shit his pants. He was just like, It went runk, it expanded on him, and then next thing you know, there's only one way it can go out. We have a flamethrower in the thing. The flame shoots out of the bottle, narrowly missing a good friend of ours. It's a videotape of it somewhere. Right. It like shoots. It's like a 12-foot flame.
You got to put that on YouTube.
Yeah, we should find it. It's somewhere, but that's the type of shit we did with fire. Which
shit, that makes the Butthole Surfers look like amateur hour, dude.
yeah. Well, we got lucky. There's more to that story, but we won't continue.
No, he could have blown his hand off. That's
totally
both hands off. Yeah. It was.
I thought you guys had something where you're shooting toilet paper across the gig and the toilet paper was on fire.
No, that never caught on fire, but we did have that was one of the theatrical things he did, where he had a leaf blower and he attached like this metal thing to the front of it, and you put a roll of toilet paper on it, and when you hit it, it would just blow the toilet paper out. It would unravel out over the crowd, and it would just you just toilet paper the entire arena, or the entire club that you're playing in.
Roll the whole club,
roll the club, basically, with that.
That's badass, right there.
That's fun. Yeah,
that's a good visual. I like that.
It was fun. So anyway, back to the Surfers. So they left Touch and Go, and everybody was very down on them. And to this day, I think people have sort of left. They have old fond memories of the Surfers, but they can't get over the fact that they left Corey Rust. They ended up signing to Capitol Records, and they put out the first record, which we talked about, Independent Worm Saloon, with John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin. And Jeff Pincus owns, to me, one of the most awesome pieces of memorabilia, because on one of the last songs on that album, Pincus was playing banjo and John Paul Jones was playing bass. Actually playing on a Butthole Surfer song. It was blowing Jeff's mind. But at one point, John Paul Jones breaks a string, and it's Jeff's bass. And John Paul Jones says, "Man, I've never broken a string before." And Pincus incredulously said, "You what? You've never?" He's like, "I've never broken a bass string before." John Paul Jones is saying this. So Jeff made him sign. He kept the string, framed it, and made John Paul Jones sign this on this day in whatever 1992. I, John Paul Jones, broke my very first bass string, and here it is.
Wow.
And
that's
Jeff
hilarious.
has it framed. So there's
now was that
which is funny though, because I listened to recently the Geddy Lee biography that came out, and Geddy Lee says that John Paul Jones claims has said to him that he's never broken a bass string. So I think Pincus needs to remind John Paul Jones that in fact he did break a bass string.
Sounds like selective. He might have broken many bass strings, and he's just not gonna own up to it. You know?
Yeah, but Jeff has the signed thing anyway.
Was that Diamanda Gallis produced thing before?
That would have been released after. I want to say that was 94, and Independent Worm Saloon was 93. So yeah, it would have been right after that. Which is also
who's Diamanda Gallis?
Diamanda Gallis is this amazing singer. She is of Armenian descent, although she's American, but she's been around since the 80s. I would describe her as an extreme vocalist.
Yeah, you're either gonna really dig it or go, "Oh my god, this."
I think she might have done some music with the bass player from Hanoi Rocks.
No.
No,
I don't.
Listen.
Maybe the bass player of Ein Stürzende Neubauten, maybe.
Okay, I listened to his biography, and there's some chick like that he was doing music with, and it was just wild avant-garde stuff. But anyways, keep going. But I'm just rambling. Pay no attention to me.
But we should mention that is a great record. She did an album with John Paul Jones called The Sporting Life, and it's just the two of them. It's basically bass. I think there's a drummer as well. So bass, drums, and her just howling like a banshee. Recommended. Definitely recommended.
Our last episode was Zeppelin, so we're
we finally did the Zepp up last week.
Nice.
2.5 hours, but it was all relevant, you know.
Well, you can tie that into that. There's a little thing there. So after that, they did one more album for Capitol, which was Electric Larryland, which was with another bass. I don't know if Paul played the bass. I should know this information. I know Nathan Calhoun, who now plays with the band Pussy Gillette, and We Are the Asteroid. He plays with a bunch of bands, but he toured.
Paul apparently played bass on that, and then a couple of other guys, Andrew Weiss and Bill Carter, played bass as well, but Paul played on bass on some of it too.
Gotcha.
Checking wiki for you.
I want to say Nathan toured with them on that, but I know that he was involved at least on writing a song on the next album, and he also played with Gibby and His Problem, which is Gibby Haynes and His Problem, which is his solo act. But
Andrew Weiss and Bill Carter both bass.
Yeah, I just said that.
So they did Electric Larryland after. So this is after Pincus left. So Pincus,
we got to mention. We got to mention that Electric Larryland is where they have this breakout hit that's basically this Beck kind of sound-alike song called Pepper, right?
Yeah, they've said that. They've said this. I don't really think it sounds because it has a sort of a similar drum beat behind it. Maybe it has that.
To me, it seems Beck inspired. But anyways, the following album, I think the Weird Revolution, they fell into the Red Hot Chili Peppers trap, which is you have a hit, and then because that song made you some money, then the next album you just write every song trying to sound like Pepper.
So here's the thing, and I was building up to Weird Revolution because this something happened in between Electric Larryland and Weird Revolution. So yes, Electric Larryland had that song. I think, although I will say,
it's a good song. I like it.
It's a good song, and actually, that's a really good album in a lot of ways. It's almost my favorite of the two Capitol records, almost even more than the John Paul Jones album. There may be neck and neck. There's things I really, really like about Electric Larryland. But the thing is, so they did that album, and then they did another album for Capitol called After the Astronaut, which After the Astronaut was released basically promo only, like advanced copy, promotional only. It never was officially released.
I thought that was abandoned, and then they did Weird Revolution.
Well, it was abandoned because the label said that they were getting such bad reviews from the advanced copies that they weren't going to put it out. And so that resulted in a lawsuit between the band and Capitol Records that
Did not know
that resulted in them leaving Capitol Records and re-recording many of those songs from After the Astronaut for Weird Revolution. So there are other versions of those songs, and there are, I think, a couple of different songs that weren't released
So
on Weird Revolution.
I'm
that was on
assuming
After
you-
the Astronaut.
I'm assuming you have After the Astronaut.
I don't have an official copy. I have burned copies, and I never.
But you've got a copy.
Yeah. I do have a copy. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care if you paid them, but you got a copy. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you can listen to it on YouTube. I think somebody's thrown it up on YouTube at some point through the years. Or
if it is, I'll post it on the ClickPit. I'll check.
there you go. Try it. See if it's there.
Yeah.
And it's it's okay. There are moments. For years, I really didn't like Weird Revolution. One of those songs was written by Nathan Calhoun, by the way, the guy I was mentioning earlier. Which is one of the better songs on there. I think there's a few. I recently, because it was recently reissued on vinyl, and I got it because I'm a completist, and so I listened to it, and it's not as bad as I thought it was originally. I was sort of it was so drum machine oriented that I couldn't really wrap my head around it, and just sort of put it on the back burner. But there's some pretty decent songs on it. It's grown on me, I'll say, a little bit.
It is on YouTube, and it will be on the ClickPit.
There you go. But yeah, it's a Weird Revolution though. But I do understand what you're saying, and it is a far more drum machine driven album. And I think ultimately that probably was what they were thinking, was we need a single, we need,
Pepper was a hit. Let's do it's like that every Chili Peppers album since Blood Sugar Sex Magic has been a full album of them recording under the bridge sound-alike songs. And it's worked out a little bit better for them, even though they sound, anybody with any taste would realize that they sound fucking horrible now, but somehow commercially, I don't know why that worked out for them. It didn't work out for Butthole Surfers.
Yeah, I don't envy the recording engineer who has to record Anthony Kiedis singing. That's all.
Yeah. Ooby dooby birdie boo. Little up in the sky, ooby dooby dooby doo doo,
and all the pitch correction they have to use because he can't sing.
I'm sure.
So, that's not
just
good.
their output up to Mother's Milk was so good.
Yeah. Mother's Milk, I think, was the ultimate Chili Peppers album, because they had John Frusciante just let loose, allowed to just rock, and what's his name? What's the drummer for fucking
Chad Smith,
who's just an amazing, and that both those guys just allowed to fucking rock. And Blood Sugar's good, but some of the lyrics are just ham-fisted and stupid when you go back and listen to that one.
Well, yeah,
but goddamn, Mother's Milk. Yeah. Anyways, enough about that band. We'll save it for our Killing the Sacred Cows episode, which is coming up.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess since that there's been the reunions, and there haven't been further recordings since Weird Revolution, but there have been the reunion shows, the 2008 one that I previously mentioned, of which, by the way, the very first show of that tour was in Asbury Lanes in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and I sadly missed it. I should have gone down there because my friend Kathleen actually joined them on stage. She wasn't nude, but she danced up on stage with them for the set.
What year was that reunion?
2008. That was 2008.
So they haven't put anything out.
They dropped what is it? Happy LSD, which is like outtake stuff.
Yeah,
tell us about that album.
So yeah, there's I have a copy of it here, as a matter of fact.
See what you cats miss out on, because we are anonymous superheroes and we don't show our face on the podcast, is all this cool shit Jay always shows us when we're in the little studio here. But he's got a vinyl copy, gatefold vinyl copy of Happy LSD.
It's called Humpty Dumpty LSD.
I'm sorry, Humpty Dumpty LSD. Yeah, my bad.
In 2002.
Right. Yeah. And so this is on their own label, which is called Latino Bugger Veil. They've had that out for a number of years. They put that double live album we talked about on Latino Bugger Veil. But this is basically just stuff that was on. It was released either originally on 45s. There were some home demos. There is the song. I believe, yeah, Earthquake is on here. They did a cover of 13th Floor Elevators Earthquake from the album Easter Everywhere. And that was released on a Atlantic Records compilation called Where the Pyramid Meets the Eye. And it had Butthole Surfers, REM, a bunch of different people playing 13th Floor Elevator and Rocky Erickson songs. And so they did Earthquake, which is a great song. But yeah, so it's basically just a bunch of outtakes and like stuff that was recorded in their practice spaces and in their home studios and stuff like that. But a lot of this stuff was released throughout the years on, like 45s or through there was an unofficial release that came out of a Spanish label called what's it called? Hold on.
Stay with us, kids. Jay is album searching. We'll return after a brief pause. He's got stacks of albums in his cramped New York apartment.
I think it's a weird name. It's in Spanish. I can't think of the name of it, but I think this includes the songs from that were initially released on this. It was like a bootleg album that came out. So yeah, but they haven't recorded anything new since the late 90s, basically.
One thing they did in the mid 90s for that, it was a god awful Romeo and Juliet remake.
Oh yeah,
whatever. I Had a Dream or something.
Yeah, it was
a song.
I remember.
I like that song. It's so not them.
Yeah. I vaguely remember
doing something or.
Yeah, they were getting paid to do something for a movie. I'm sure that's exactly what that was, and like I said, they didn't shy away from money, especially, the older they got. Oh, actually, real quick, in changing subject, I realized that we sort of going back to the early Butthole Surfers and how they grew up. Gibby Haynes is the son of he's now deceased, but a famous television personality named Mr. Peppermint. And he was famous in Texas. He was famous in San Antonio, which is where Gibby grew up. And so
he hosted like kids shows, right?
It was a kids show. In fact, he was kind of like a Captain Kangaroo kind of guy. And one of the actors on that show was the same actor who played Lurch in the Addams Family.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
They had Lurch.
They had Lurch. So and there are recordings. You can find, there's lots of recordings of those episodes like online.
That Romeo and Juliet that you mentioned was directed by Baz Luhrmann, who's one of the most horrific, terrible, untalented directors in the history of the planet. He will be he's going to be in our Killing Sacred Cows episode as well. But he did that god awful Elvis rap movie they just released.
Oh my god!
Yeah, same idiot. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
So then just to wrap up my knowledge of Butthole Surfers, what they've done in recent years, they had the 2008 reunion. I think they played, and from that, they didn't play many shows, but one of the shows that they did play was one of the first shows they played was in London, and there was an actual release of that show. There was a company that was making CDs of the shows, like they were the first ones to do. I think Pixies later on would do it, but you could order the CD at the show and either pick it up at the end of the show or they would mail it to you. I forget exactly how it was, but there's
it was before you could just pay $10 and download it off of Metallica's website.
Sure, exactly.
Right,
So there's an official gatefold CD release of this live in London show from, it would have been 2008, and that's how I knew. And I'll go to the show that I saw in 2008 at Webster Hall. That's how I knew that I missed probably about 5 songs, and I missed those 5 songs because they didn't get to play them because the entire set. So I should say this: when Gibby performs, he has something called Gibby-tronics, which is this a box of effects, and he has two microphones. He has one that has sort of a slapback effect, and he's got one that he runs through his Gibby-tronics, and he can make crazy. He can pitch his voice down, and that's how he gets all those weird vocal effects and lots of delays. And so the entire show, like from the get-go, he's looking over at the monitor guy, and he's pointing at the mic that has all the effects, and he's like pointing his thumbs up saying, I want more of that in my monitor. He's asking for more of that. And it's going on the entire show. You see it happening the entire show. He's doing it, and then he'll look over at the guy and he's whatever. Well, let's say we're getting near the end. There's like 6 songs left, and I can't remember if they left the stage or not and we're coming back. But in any case, I see Gibby walk over to the monitor guy, like over to the side of the stage, and he points at himself and he goes, me up, and like forcefully showing his thumbs up, and the monitor guy just flips him off, just fucking sticks the finger up right in Gibby's face, and Gibby pushes him, and so the guy pushes him. They're like pushing at each other over the board. There's like this sort of shoving match. Gibby walks off the stage on the other side of the stage. He walks off stage right, comes back out grinning, holding a beer, and then just chucks the beer at the guy, throws the beer. He's like 30 feet at the guy, misses the guy, hits the security guard that's sitting right there.
Oh, nice.
The security guard just turns around, grabs Gibby, and hauls him off the stage. And Paul starts playing The Shaw Sleeps in Lee Harvey's Grave, which is what they always end their shows with. And Paul sings that song so they can get away with doing it without Gibby. And so that was it. We just got to see that a shortened version of that set.
And you saw that.
Yeah.
So Paul Leary, I know he's got one called Born Stupid and then History of Dogs.
Yeah, History of Dogs came out in '91, and that was originally out on Rough Trade, and it was recently reissued by Kramer on Shimmy Disc. And then he also has the Born Stupid, which is his most recent solo album. And they're both good.
You said one was all banjo.
No, that's Jeff Pincus, and it's the JD. He has 2 albums, and he has a third one coming out, which is with a full band called Grow a Pair. But the first 2, one's called Fungus Shui, which is the second one, and I think the first one's called Stay on the Grass or Keep on the Grass. Keep on the Grass, and it's psychedelic banjo is awesome. It's so
that honky stuff was amazing.
Yeah,
it's great.
He had a band called Honky that they dropped like 5 albums, and it's just kind of
it's like southern rock,
southern rock filtered, filtered through a bit of weirdness. He's played with the Melvins quite a bit, which is awesome. That's a perfect fit, And that's another band with a rotating bass player syndrome. Good God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he has another album coming out, I think this next month. It's in June, called Grow a Pair, and it has a bunch of guests on it, including I'm pretty sure Buzz from the Melvins is on it. There's just a bunch of people are playing on it.
That's great.
But the solo banjo stuff is awesome, and I highly recommend that.
How was Daddy Longhead? I remember Silky, you telling me about them back in the day.
Yeah, Daddy Longhead.
They were great.
He did something called the Jack Officers.
Jack Officers was him and Gibby. And it was sort of their dance record. Very electronic. It's funny. I do like the album. I should say Daddy Longhead featured a great guitarist named Jim Young, who's still around. But he was in a band called DDT in Atlanta back in Athens,
I remember
Atlanta.
DDT. Local punk band,
exactly, and those albums are great. If you can find those DDT albums, those are fantastic. But Jim was the guitarist of Daddy Longhead, and
Masonic was
the story I remember was that Jeff had said something. I read in an interview. I could be wrong a little bit about this, but his reasoning for quitting or for stopping Daddy Longhead, even though they have continued to make albums since, or a couple of them, I think he didn't tour with them anymore because Jim was such a mess. He'd come home from the tour and there'd be holes in his seats, and it would be his, whatever seat that Jim had been sitting in, there'd be holes in from, I don't know if it was cigarettes or whatever, but there would be he'd come back and he'd have to, do repair work on his car because of touring with him. But so anyway, I think that was when he started Honky. But I think it also had to do with him not living in. I think Jim stayed in Georgia, and Jeff at that point was in Texas, although now he is relocated to North Carolina.
Yeah, I think they've got 5 records unless I've missed anything, but it's been a while.
Daddy Longhead, according to Wiki, has 4 records. So 91, 97, 98, and 2021.
Yeah, I got the 2021 one recently. Yeah, good stuff. I mean, Jeff never disappoints. That guy is an American treasure as far as I'm concerned.
So what's the deal with Gibby? Is he still all smacked out?
Oh, no, not at all. Oh, no, he's fine. He lives here in Brooklyn. I see him occasionally. And I should say I've had the chance to tell 2 of the members in person how much Locust Abortion Technician changed the way I look at music. And I've told the other 2 via email, but Gibby lives in, I won't say the neighborhood, but he lives in Brooklyn. And he's got his kid's like 13 or 14 now.
Oh, no shit.
And he back doing accounting, or what's he doing? Do we know?
He's married to a lawyer. His wife is a lawyer.
There you go.
I think he's just
a house husband.
Kid. Kind of. I mean, I think they were recently basically just came out and said that they would never tour again. And Gibby's thing was, man, I got a 13-year-old kid. I'm enjoying going to Little League baseball games and soccer practice and blah blah blah.
I get it.
And and so he's got that going on. Paul has not enjoyed touring in years, so he doesn't. He always considered it sort of a necessity type thing, and now it's not anymore. And he's content. And Paul has had a successful recording career. He has his own studio. He's recorded. He had a huge album, although I'm quite frankly not a huge fan of it, but that Sublime album that's so big, that was recorded by Paul. So
oh wow,
he has, and he recorded Meat Puppets Too High to Die as well. He's
nice.
He's made a name for himself as a studio guy, and so he doesn't care for touring anymore. I get it.
Have you, as a studio cat, producer, engineer, whatever, have you worked with any of these guys?
No, I tried to get Gibby in the studio, and I've met him a few times actually.
Right.
He knows of the studio because it's sort of a known studio. He knows who Martin Beasy is.
Here's how you entice him into the studio. Say, if you come record with me, Snags and Silky might let you on their podcast. They'll consider it. Yeah.
Actually, it's funny what he said to me, because at the time, I think he was more interested in not so much rock stuff. He was like, do you have any cool keyboards? And, now I actually do have a few things that are cool. They're still sort of more analog. I don't know if he'd be really that interested in them, but at the time he was like, you got any cool keyboards around? I was like, no. And he was like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm into nowadays. So I couldn't really.
I thought you had done something with Pincus or something.
See, that's why you should have just said what you had to say, dude, and then figure it out before I got to. Yeah, man, we got keyboards. Yeah, just show up.
But yeah,
get him in there.
But I guess that's kind of it. Gibby, like I said, he lives, you see him around occasionally, and Jeff is living in North Carolina. Paul's living in Texas. King is living in Texas. There was, I want to say it was like 5 or 6 years ago, there was a moment that got everybody's hopes up because Paul basically announced that there was going to be a new Butthole Surfers album and that he had started working on it, and he had invited Pincus and King in to do some work on it. And I think Gibby was supposed to come in, and then he was still supposed to come in, and he was still supposed to come in, and he never came. And finally Paul got it out of him that he really just wasn't interested in doing it anymore. That I think he realized this, it was going to open up this whole new thing that he was going to have to do this, and he just didn't want to do it. And so it all just fell apart. And
same exact thing. That's the same thing that one
really takes it. You start looking at as soon as I record now, I'm going to have all these people at me, and I'm trying to be a dad, and
That's the same exact thing that happened with Led Zeppelin after the O2 Arena show. Fucking John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page were ready to go. Fucking Junior finally figured out the drum parts, so that was covered. And Plant they could not convince him.
I don't, but that's hard. And I get it. Cause he's, he was at that O2 show. What is he? He was almost 70 at that point. He's like 60.
Yeah. He doesn't need to do the tour. He doesn't need to do it. Yeah. He was really close with Bonzo, and he said he doesn't feel right continuing without him. And so, him and Gibby have similar things going on.
Well, but the other thing is that Robert Plant, was singing those songs really high. He was a young kid.
The
older you get, your voice gets lower. If you listen, if you're sitting with your guitar and you know how to play Black Dog, and you're playing along with that O2 thing, you're like, wait a minute, what's he? What?
They downtuned it.
They downtuned all that shit. Just they had to do it so that he could hit the notes. There was no way he was going to hit. There's no way he's going to hit the notes at the original tuning. And that's the thing. The older you get, you can't hit those notes.
And Robert Plant says, "I'm not a jukebox." Almost, which sucks because that music is so important.
I think we had this conversation last week.
Is just so disrespectful to what he created,
Yeah.
I get it. I totally get it. If you're, it's especially as a singer, it's so the toll on your body is so great, and it's like it's hard. It's really difficult, and for him to tour like that would be near impossible because it demands so much. And if he wants to give the best each night,
just do what Paul Stanley did and play the vocal track from the record, and you're good.
Oh, so brutal. God, so brutal. Such a terrible. Anyway, just real quick.
Hey, we brought up Kiss in this episode. Silky, you want to say anything about the Elder?
Don't buy the Elder.
Yeah, never buy that. But real quick, here's my Kiss interjection. Did you see the thing that Matt Cameron posted about getting the cease and desist order from Kiss when he was a teenager. He was there's Matt Cameron of
Soundgarden,
Soundgarden.
That guy.
Don't say the other.
So he's a teenager, like 13, 14 years old, and they're a Kiss cover band. They're just like they're bad. He says, they've got the bad makeup, but whatever. But
they're teenagers.
But they're teenagers, and they have a scrapbook. And one of the members of the band's dad works for something or other, and so they get to go meet Kiss, right? And so he brings their scrapbook of all the cool, goofy pictures of them playing the school, whatever or another,
dressed up as Kiss,
dressed up as Kiss, and they show Paul Stanley, and it's like, oh, cool. But he said their one mistake was that they didn't change the name of the band, but they were 13, 14 years old. So they just called themselves Kiss. So 4 to 6 weeks later, Bill Aucoin management sends them a goddamn letter, cease and desist. You can't do that anymore. They're fucking 13, 14-year-old band. If you ever need any proof that those guys are complete douchebags.
There
you go. Yeah.
The only two good people in that band left in the early 80s.
That's just rough.
Gene and Paul, proven douchebags for sure.
Anyway, I had to throw that in since you mentioned the Kiss. But anyway, that is my knowledge of the Butthole Surfers. I love them dearly. They changed my life. I remember the first time, I should say the very first time I heard them in Columbus, Georgia. I was living in Columbus College housing, and my buddy Chris, who great friends to this day, he had it on cassette. He had Locust Abortion Technician on cassette. And he's like, you have to hear this, and he hit play, and it was Sweatloaf, and Sweatloaf takes a long time to build, so he hits play, and it's like, I don't know, is there anything on this tape? What's happening? It takes like 35 seconds where you can hear the organ start creeping in, and then there's the famous. You should definitely have Sweatloaf on your click thing so they could listen to it. But it's the famous aping of the Jim Morrison ad lib on stage, and then he famously ends it with Satan repeated many times. And there have been many times where I've cranked that up at home, and I just think of my neighbors going, "What the hell is that?" when the Satan starts repeating really loud. Great. But anyway.
I was Monday morning this week at 8:30 a.m. I came into the office and I just fucking cranked up the Butthole Surfers and I made my coworkers close their office doors. It was great.
That's fantastic.
Good job.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for having me on this.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
We just did not want to attempt this band without you.
No, you got to have the subject matter expert when you're.
I wish I had been a little more
Doing it.
prepared, but yeah, this was fun.
No, this was great. Jay always had some VHS copy or some, and they were a bit mysterious in the early 90s. You didn't have the internet the way you do now, or
Kids, we didn't have the YouTubes and the Twitters.
And actually, that reminds me, and I hate to interject again, but in Columbus, Georgia, at a Blockbuster Video, remember those things? We found this, and I mentioned this when we were talking about the Bill Hicks episode.
Yeah,
there was the Impact Video magazine, and it had this, and this should also go on your click. It's all, you can find it on YouTube. It's called Butthole Surfers Welcome to Texas, and it's a video produced by Alex Winter of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures. And he actually has a brief appearance in it at the very beginning, which is kind of funny. But
we've got that. That's on the Click Pit. It's linked under the Bill Hicks links. Just Impact Video Magazine. Yeah, Butthole Surfers, Bill Hicks. Yeah,
and it's a very disturbing video, and of course that's what you would expect from. And it was shot on they had a ranch in near Austin, Texas. They have this compound that they actually lived on for years, and they had their own little studio on there. And it recently went up for sale. I saw someone posted it up for sale on Facebook. It was going for like $1.2 million or something.
Oh,
but anyway,
I just remember Jay always had some of these obscure things back when really collecting music in the early 90s. Everything was obscure because you had to really search for this shit. But I loved getting into that band at that time. It was just so much, the albums were great, but I always wondered what else was out there, and I'm sure that they've got tons of shit in the vaults, but
who knows? Who knows?
I really wish I had picked up that book when it was $45.
I should mention there's another book called Let's Go to Hell by James Burns, which is quite good. It's very thorough. It has a lot of information. The book that you're referring to is definitely more of an art book. Like, I mean, it had text in it as well, but it was more
it's
of
mostly,
it's a lot of ephemera and stuff like that.
It would have been cool to see that
So
magazine.
hit me to the titles of these books so I can look for them and put them on the Click Pit.
The James Burns one's called Let's Go to Hell.
All right, and that's about the Butthole Surfers.
It's all about. It's just Butthole Surfers.
Awesome. And then what's the other book that Brett is gonna buy on his credit card anyways, even though he's saying he's not?
No, it's $400. What does regret?
Do payments.
Yeah.
What does regret mean? Okay.
Yeah.
He'll be sending me pictures of that probably in about a week.
Yeah.
What does regret mean?
That would be great, but I can't see that. Not
All right.
400.
If I can find those, I'll slap them on the Click Pit for you cats. All right. Well, Butthole Surfers, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed the nostalgia, and we'll be back with more shit. In the meantime, follow us on Spotify and YouTube. Tell your friends, and peace out.
Deuces.
Gotta say, there you go.